Hi, I'm Grace, and I'm a children's program instructor at the Courtenay Recreation Center. And today, I'm going to show you how to do some fun science experiments at home. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about density. So, for these experiments, you will need a transparent glass, an egg, a spoon, salt, water, a straw, plasticine or Play-Doh if you have it, cooking oil, a marker, and then an assortment of small objects, so like a golf ball, a ping pong ball, buttons, rocks, plasticine, just things you can find around your house, little trinkets and stuff. So, with that out of the way, let's start. So, what is density? In scientific terms, it is the mass per unit volume. This means that density measures the amount of atoms in the space that the object takes up. So even though this golf ball and this ping pong ball are both approximately the same size, they're different densities. And you can tell this because when I put them in water, the golf ball sinks and the ping pong ball floats. So the first step of this experiment is to get some warm water. Once you've done this, you'll take your water and pour it into the tall glass. You have to make sure that you leave enough space at the top so that when you put the egg in, it won't, the glass won't overflow. So, as you can see, when I put the egg into this glass, it sinks all the way to the bottom. Now, I'm going to take another spoon, one that's dry. You don't want to put a wet spoon into a dry container. You're going to take some salt and you're going to pour it into the water. And then you're going to take another spoon and stir it so that all the salt is mixed into the water. So you should put in about a tablespoon, and that should work. So now I'm going to try and put this egg back in again, and you'll notice that this time it floats instead of sinking to the bottom. So why does this experiment work? Well, by putting salt into the water, you're actually changing the density of it. You're adding more atoms into the water, so it becomes more and more dense. Once the density of the water is greater than the density of the egg floats. In this experiment, we're going to be looking at the densities of a bunch of different objects and liquids. So, what you're first going to need is you're going to take your water and you're going to pour it into a tall glass. Again, you want to make sure that there's enough room at the top of the glass so that you can put in the oil, and that when you put in other objects, it won't overflow. After you've got your water, you're going to take a little bit of your oil and you're going to pour it into the glass. Once you've done this, you should be able to see that there are two very distinct layers that form. The top layer of oil and the bottom layer of water. So after you've done that, you're going to collect a bunch of different things from around your house. So I've got a ping pong ball, a golf ball, I've got some plasticine, and I've got some buttons. And based on which layers they float on, you can tell how dense they are compared to the water and the oil. Here you can see the two distinct layers of the oil and the water. They separate because they're two different densities. The oil is lighter, it's less dense, so it floats on top of the water. As you can see, when I put the golf ball in the water, it sinks all the way down to the bottom. When I put the ping pong ball in, it floats right on top of the oil. If I put plasticine in, it sinks to the bottom as well. But when I put a button in, it floats right between the two layers. So because of the way different objects float on different layers of liquid, we can tell that some are more dense than others. For example, this golf ball is probably the densest, whereas this ping pong ball is the lightest. So now that I've shown you a couple objects that will float or sink on various densities of liquids, can you think of some that you could find around your house that would float or sink? So next I'm going to be teaching you how to make a hydrometer, which is a really simple way of measuring density of liquids specifically. So you're going to take a straw and you're going to cut it in half. Once you've got your straw cut in half, you're going to take a small amount of plasticine and you're going to stick it on one end of the straw. This makes up your hydrometer. You can see that on one end, the plasticine completely covers the open end of the straw. However, on the other, it's open, like that. You're going to take your hydrometer and place it into a glass of water, like that, so that it floats. After this, you're going to take a marker and you're going to mark where in the water you're going to mark the level at which your hydrometer floats at. So for me, it's right here. Depending on the density of the liquid that your hydrometer is in, it will either be higher or lower than the mark that's already on your hydrometer. So if I add salt, then theoretically, my hydrometer should float higher because the liquid is more dense. You can see that the mark that I put on the hydrometer for where it was in water is much higher than it is sitting in salt water. Bye! Thanks for experimenting with me.